In this lesson, we're going to be talking about auditing. Primarily, we're going to be talking about doing auditing or the different auditing capabilities under Windows because they're a little bit easier to understand and you've got a little bit more control, and also you're more likely to run into systems where you are going to be doing this sort of activity on a Windows system than you would other systems. There are different types of auditing under Unix. In the case that I'm looking at here, I've got a system that's running Ubuntu Linux, and I've installed a program called Audit D, and there are some configuration files here. In order to use the Audit D program and use that to help you, you would have to configure this Audit D or the audit daemon. So you can see in the configuration file, there's a number of settings regarding the log file, as well as what to do with the logs and how to handle those logs, as well as whether to listen on TCP and whether to use Kerberos and a number of other configurations. There's also a file called audit.rules, and in this case, it's just an empty file where you would have to add a number of your own rules that would allow you to do auditing on this particular system. Now, when we're talking about auditing, you can also use the syslog facility that's on a Unix-like operating system, and you can set up a number of rules in the syslog file that would allow you to turn up logging for particular events, and then you could use another program to do some filtering, like you could use LogWatch or some other sort of intrusion detection system or log monitoring system. So that might allow you to do some amount of auditing as well. But getting to the Windows auditing, we are going to do some policy auditing. So I can bring up the Windows menu here, and I've got administrative tools turned on. If you don't have this in your Windows menu, you can get it turned on by editing the menu, or there are other places to go find the administrative tools. So right now I'm going to bring up this program called Local Security Policy, and it's going to pop open my policy manager, and you can see a number of security settings here. I've got account policies. That would be where I would set password policies and account lockout policies. What I really want here is local policies, and I want to bring up my audit policies. So these are the policies that I've got on a local system, and there may be other things that I can do on a Windows domain or an Active Directory that would be in addition to these policies here. So you can see I can audit logon events. I can audit account management. So if users are created or deleted, I could do auditing on those. I can audit logon events, and that's not necessarily accounts. That could be places where services need to do some logon in order to start the service up. I can do policy change audits, privilege use, process tracking, system events, and all of these have ways that we can set it. So I can audit success or failure, or I could do both. So what I may want to do, for example, is audit logon event failure. And this would generate event logs when there was a logon attempt that failed. So I may want to see where people are attempting to log on to a system and failing to log on, because that may demonstrate that there's an attack in progress. And if I'm investigating the trail of a breach or a breach attempt, then I may want to have these audit policies enabled. And it may be a good idea to have an entire enterprise. If you're working with an enterprise, just have these events turned on a regular basis, because it makes the job of an investigator much easier if these are already in place, because we can't always guarantee, obviously, that we will be called in the middle of an incident where we can get these turned on and be able to get the information that would be really helpful for us as forensic investigators. So this would be a log-on audit event. Now, I can do things like object access. I could do a failure on object, and an object would be anything that has system access control lists. So a good example would be files. If somebody tried to access a file and they didn't have permission for that, a failure audit would flag when they attempted to access that file that they didn't have permission for, and of course that object access failed. I could also do a success audit where they attempted to gain access and it succeeded, and that's one way potentially of tracking a user's activities on a system, where you can see every time they attempt to access any object on the system, so you'll have a pretty good audit trail of most things that a user may have done. If you start turning on all of these audit events and you audit success or both success and failure, you'll have a pretty good idea of what a user is doing. And again, that may be really helpful depending on the type of investigation that you're doing. You may want to have that deep audit trail as you're going through and trying to figure out what somebody did and what they tried or attempted to do and whether they succeeded or failed. So these audit policies are really important, and not just as an afterthought for a forensic investigator, but something that if you are working as an investigator within a company, it's something you may want to think about working with the IT staff in order to come up with a reasonable level of auditing on every system. So in case something happens, you have that audit trail that you can go back and look at, so you can figure out what's really going on or what did go on in the case of an incident. So that's audit policies and the types of audit policies that we can set.